Chapter 4, How Do Students Develop Mastery? This is by Barry Waite and Denise Hauta. How Learning Works sets out to provide principles for smart teaching, teaching that is based on an evidence-based approach that focuses on how students learn. In Chapter 4, the authors focus specifically on mastery. Just how do students learn to successfully complete complicated tasks? How many of you have been in the classroom and have ever heard the following statements from your students? I didn't get any of that. It's like they were speaking a different language. That was way over my head. Or maybe you've even experienced those feelings yourself while taking a class or listening to a lecture on a specific subject matter. In the textbook, How Learning Works, we see the definition of mastery as the attainment of a high degree of competence within a particular area. This was referenced to mastery being similar to driving a vehicle, where there is a number of required simple skills that work in combination. As a driver, you need to understand what the brakes do in relation to the steering wheel, in relation to the signal lights. This is no different when someone who's becoming a master of a specific subject area. But can expertise also be a liability? The problem arises when a student comes into a new learning environment and really isn't aware of what they don't know about the subject matter. This is referred to as unconscious incompetence, while an instructor comes into that same situation and lacks awareness of what they do know, referred to as unconscious competence. Instructors or experts in their field have a lot more knowledge in a specific field, and that creates some interesting dynamics in the classroom. An expert can usually chunk larger individual pieces of information together relatively easily. They can also recognize patterns because they have the expertise in a narrow field of study, and they also have a lot of practice, which allows them to perform tasks automatically. The problem with this scenario is that when an instructor is unconsciously competent in a given area, it can lead to difficulty in the classroom. They tend to combine their pieces of knowledge together. They also take shortcuts, underestimate the time that students need to learn the subject matter, and also overestimate the student's ability. This approach makes learning difficult and leads students to feel lost. The goal then is to assist students to also become masters of the subject matter. In order to do this, the following three elements need to be present. They need to have the component skills, the parts that make up the overall skill. They need to become effective in their ability to integrate the parts, and they need to have the knowledge of when to apply what has been learned. The authors present the elements of mastery using the concept of concentric circles. The key element once students acquire and practice the skills is learned when they apply them. If we go back to the driving analogy, students may learn a sequence of skills for different types of parking. They need to be able to judge whether getting into a particular spot requires a multi-step parallel parking process, or they can simply drive in. Let's look at this in greater detail. The goal should be to help the students understand the individual component skills they require to learn or master a subject matter. This can involve a process of breaking down the larger concepts into individual steps. By breaking down the pieces, it gives students more time on the individual parts before seeing the bigger picture. And the more practice with the individual component skills, the more fluency. The second piece is the integration of these complex skills. One thing we know is that performance goes down if we try to multitask with complex tasks. Think of the driving example and now add in a cell phone. Too many complex tasks can lead to cognitive load, which is ineffective to learning. Instructors should work to lighten aspects of the task in order to remove this extra cognitive load. Finally, mastery can only be developed if a student understands when to apply the knowledge. The key point to know is that transfer of knowledge is not automatic. Sometimes an instructor will see a student do well on a chapter exam, but not on a final. Or they may understand what to do, but not why. Instructors need to find ways to assist students in developing these skills to enhance the transfer of knowledge.
What strategies can help us tie all of this together? Here are a few. Consider pushing past your own blind spot. Work through the steps you're asking students to do. Share your syllabus with someone outside your discipline, or talk to someone teaching a similar course and find out what steps they use. One strategy when teaching a complex task is to break it down into its component pieces As an example, a piano teacher may have the student focus on playing only on the right hand of the piece, then the left before integrating them. The authors note that we can't assume that just because students know how to do one task, they know when to apply them all together. Here are several strategies on how we can help students to practice the transfer of their component skills into completing a task. Writing is a good example of how all three parts work together. Consider all the elements students must master in order to write a perfect press release. How does this chapter relate to our learning and experience as students and teachers? It's interesting to compare the process outlined by the authors to Bloom's taxonomy, a model that is often used to explain how we acquire knowledge. How can we relate the principles of mastery to some of the other readings and discussions in class? Strategies in this chapter can help teachers get better at meeting learning outcomes while also motivating students to tackle challenging material. We are asked to provide our intellectual reaction to the chapter. I thought about Malcolm Gladwell, who famously claimed in his 2008 book Outliers that it takes 10,000 hours to achieve mastery in a discipline. Does it really?
This formula offers hope to students who are new to a given field of study and who often feel challenged in their ability to understand all the intricate pieces of a specific topic. No longer is there a belief that mastery is only from within, rather a process. I tend to agree with the author's methodology and can actually see how the effort and practice I've put in certain areas has allowed me to gain competency in a given field, and I can also see how this has led me to skip over specific elements when I've been teaching in the classroom.
In summary, it's important that we are always considering where our students are starting from in every class. The cliché "you can't run before you can walk" is applicable here. As educators, we can't make assumptions about what our students know or what we think they should know.